Charge-in must be struck. Filiu responded coldly, the sound of his fluttering garments intensifying in the air. Who are you to dare obstruct me? Another person roared angrily, but their voice soon faltered, presumably due to Filiu's relentless assault, leaving them unable to speak further. Leave, and there will be no fight. Filiu, seemingly following Sue's instructions, did not strike with lethal force. However, his tone was icy, allowing for no room for negotiation. Although Jingrui couldn't discern the identity of the man being stopped outside, he immediately rushed out. Moments later, his voice rang out, "Filiu, stop fighting. This person is a guest and may enter." No said he could. Leave. Filiu insisted. Su couldn't help but slightly furrow his brows. Apart from the few people Filiu was already acquainted with, when ordinary guests came to visit, they would be announced by a servant. If Su was willing to meet them, he would instruct Filiu not to obstruct them, so there had never been any conflicts. This guest had clearly relied on some sort of status to barge in from outside, and the household servants not only dared not stop him forcefully but also couldn't even manage to announce his arrival beforehand, which had led to Filiu intercepting them. Su would not have met with such a rude guest in the first place. Just as he was about to raise his voice to refuse the visitor, his gaze shifted to Tingxing. The child's face was deathly pale, his head tilted back and his mouth agape as he listened intently to the commotion outside. Both of his hands were tightly entwined, almost deformed by the force of his grip. A thought crossed Su's mind, and he immediately changed his decision, calling out to the outside, "Filiu, let him in." The sounds of fighting abruptly ceased, and Jingrui's voice followed, his tone quite courteous, "Are you unharmed? Why would you just barge in like this? Is there an urgent matter? My father is not at home, but I can accompany you to the main hall to wait." "I am not here to see Duke Shay," the man replied as he stormed into the snow cottage, only to be met with Sue's gaze, serene yet tinged with a hint of iciness. Involuntarily, he halted in his tracks, his eyes darting around the room before settling on Tingxing, who stood there unharmed. Finally regaining his composure, he asked, "Tingxing, are you all right?" "Yes," Tingxing answered respectfully in a low voice. "You know this child?" Jingrui, who had followed the man in, hurriedly asked. "Jingrui," the man turned around and spoke solemnly, "I heard that this child accidentally collided with the carriage of a noble guest on the street, possibly startling your important guest, so it's no wonder you were angry. However, he is still just a child, so I ask you to consider my humble request and let him apologize to your guest before releasing him." Jingrui stared at him for quite a moment, not reacting until Su let out a chuckle. Then, he joined in the laughter. "Your Highness, it seems there has been a misunderstanding. Tingxing did not collide with my carriage. We happened to pass by and brought him back to have his injuries assessed. If you don't believe me, you can ask Tingxing himself." The man was taken aback, glancing at Tingxing's expression before considering Jingrui's usual reputation, and realized that his words were true, leaving him somewhat embarrassed. "I was unaware that Prince Jing had arrived." Su slowly rose and offered a bow. "Please forgive Filiu's earlier offense." Jingrui hurriedly stepped forward to introduce them. "Your Highness Prince Jing, this is Mr. Su Jie." The seventh prince, Prince Jing Jingyan, was 31 years old, a tall and elegant young man. His appearance was not much different from that of his brothers, but due to his years spent leading troops outside, he had an additional air of resoluteness to his royal demeanor, and his skin was not as delicately maintained as the other princes. Upon hearing Suja's name, he showed no particular reaction, but perhaps out of respect for Jingrui's solemn introduction, he courteously returned the bow. On the other hand, Su, with his seemingly casual and indifferent expression, took the opportunity to carefully scrutinize Prince Jing. Is Tingxing a member of Prince Jing's household? Jingruwei asked his guest as he invited them to sit down. No. Prince Jing seemed somewhat embarrassed, as if unsure how to phrase his response. Tingxing is currently residing in the Yao Pavilion. The Yao Pavilion? Jingruwei could not have imagined such a place and blurted out, "Isn't that where the banished palace slaves dwell?" He's so young, what crime did he commit to be confined there? Tingxing's lips pressed together into a rigid line, his face devoid of any color. He was born there, accompanying his mother in her imprisonment, Prince Jing said, knowing that even if he didn't tell Jingruwei, it would be easy for him to find out. He quickly continued, "If there's nothing else, please let him return soon." According to palace rules, those in the Yao Pavilion are not allowed to spend the night outside. His mother must be very worried right now. Do you know his mother? Although Jingruwei knew he shouldn't pry further, he couldn't suppress his curiosity. Prince Jing's main consort had passed away years ago, and he now only had 2 side consorts by his side, with no other concubines. Compared to other princes who had a garden full of beauties, he was an oddity. Perhaps he had a special affection for a palace slave with a criminal record, and if one were to think further, this child might be. As his thoughts reached this point, Jingruwei felt his imagination dangerously approaching that of Eugen's and hurriedly stifled it, laughing sheepishly. Prince Jing was several years older and had much richer experiences than Jingruwei. He was a clever man and could tell at a glance what Jingruwei was thinking, but he did not intend to clarify. As for Tingxing's existence, he had only accidentally discovered it a few years ago. At that time, the child had been tormented beyond recognition. Over the years, Prince Jing had used his power to ensure that Tingxing was no longer beaten, but he could not completely protect him. Therefore, every time he left the capital to patrol the border, he couldn't help but worry about Tingxing. This time, upon returning to the capital, Prince Jing had been busy with some affairs at the Ministry of War. When he finally had some free time to visit Tingxing, he heard that one of Tingxing's companions had said that Tingxing had caused trouble on the streets. Prince Jing hurriedly inquired and came to his rescue, and fortunately, nothing serious had happened. "My apologies for intruding upon your residence without permission. I shall certainly come to apologize another day," said Prince Jing, no longer dwelling on the matter. He stood up and gave Tingxing a meaningful glance. "It's getting late, we shall take our leave now." Before he could finish speaking, Su suddenly began to cough. Initially, it seemed as if he was suppressing it with great effort, but as the coughing grew more severe, it appeared as if his internal organs were being torn apart. Cold sweat of soybeans broke out on his forehead, which was covered in bulging veins. Jingruwei, who had known Su for quite some time, had never seen him cough like this before. He became anxious and hurried over to pat Su's back, but to no avail. As he wiped Su's sweat with a handkerchief, he noticed that Su's temples were burning hot, while his cheeks were icy cold. Jingruwei became even more flustered and called out for someone to fetch a doctor. Filiu also rushed over, holding Su's trembling body like a frightened child, unable to speak and only letting out cries of "ah, ah." After a long while, Su gradually calmed down, slightly removing the handkerchief covering his mouth to reveal a glaring bloodstain before quickly rolling it up inside. Jingruwei had already seen it and felt a wave of sadness in his heart, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he whispered in Su's ear, "Brother Su, do you need to take one of Dr. Sun's pills?" "No need," Su replied, trying to regulate his breathing and giving Filiu a smile. "I'm just coughing, Filiu. Don't be afraid. Tonight, Filiu can help Brother Su massage his back, and that will be enough." "Filiu massage back?" Yes, with Filiu's massage, Brother Su will be fine, and nothing will happen. Prince Jing had been watching from the side, unsure whether to leave or stay. Seeing Su calm down, he stepped forward and asked gently, "Is Mr. Su unwell?" Su slowly turned his eyes, found Tingxing staring at him with wide eyes, and gave him a slight smile, beckoning, "Tingxing, come here for a moment." Tingxing glanced at Prince Jing, not quite understanding, but still slowly walked to the side of the bench. "Tingxing, would you like me to teach you how to read these books?" Tingxing was startled and didn't know how to respond for a moment. Prince Jing furrowed his brows and said, "Mr. Su, Tingxing is from the Yao Pavilion." "I know," Su replied, his eyes still moist from the severe coughing earlier, but his gaze appeared even more intense. "I'm just asking you, are you willing or not?" Tingxing's chest heaved rapidly a couple of times, and somehow, he suddenly felt that this must be an opportunity. So, he gritted his teeth, puffed out his chest, and said loudly, "I am willing." "Good," Sue's pale face showed a deeper smile, and he reached out to hold the child's hand in his own. "You go back first. I will find a way to bring you to my side."